Hi, my name is Nicolle Sibusiso Ndiweni. So I was born in Bulawayo, but I was raised in Karoi. So that's a smaller city, even class a town really. My childhood was good. I had a really good childhood. I enjoyed being the only child for 4 years. Then my little brother and sister turned up, the twins. But no, really pleasant. Lots of family, lots of love, lots of sun and animals. So always remember every Easter we'd go to a place called Kariba, and the drive up there, you'd see, elephants, you'd see wildlife, monkeys crossing the road, tortoises crossing the road. So yeah, just lots of pleasant family memories. We used to always go back to where I was born because that's where my grandmother lived, so my mother's mother. And we were all born there. So my mom would always go back to Bulawayo to give birth because her mom was there. So had all my cousins lived there, and yeah, really, I love where I was born. Actually, I'm Ndebele, and a lot of Ndebele people settled in Bulawayo. So yeah, it's always nice to hear your language and hear people speaking it, even though I could brush up on my skills. But yeah, it always feels like home. So we speak Ndebele, but I also speak Shona, and English is also a common language that is spoken in Zimbabwe. So yeah, so where I'm from, where I was born, mostly it's Ndebele, but Karoi is in Mashona land, so mostly Shona. So I do remember the language. I do speak Ndebele. I also speak Shona, but predominantly I speak English. I mean, having moved from Zimbabwe in 2002, I obviously speak more English living in England than I do both languages. But I do try. I try my best. And if you spoke to Zimbabwean people listening to me speak, they might laugh, but I do give it a good go. I think, like most people at the time, our family wanted a better life. There was a lot of instability in Zimbabwe at the time, and people were looking at their options outside of Zimbabwe. Australia was a consideration, the UK was a consideration. And I suppose when my mother got a job in England as a nurse, that was the best choice for our family. And the plan was for us all to follow her shortly after she'd settled and, had found a place, etc. So we moved because things were tough and things were getting tougher. And our family just thought, right, what's the best thing? And my parents were thinking at the time, obviously, I was not old enough to be considered in that thought process. They were thinking, what is best for us? And at the time, England was what was best for us. So I was a 13-year-old girl when this was happening. So you can imagine that's a really pivotal point in your life. I just left junior school. So I'd spent my whole kind of youth in Karoi with my friends, just life as I knew it. And all of a sudden, it was like my mom then left, which is, again, when you're used to having your mom around, trying to adjust to just having your dad around as a young girl is also a little bit tough because, you want to talk to her about your skin breaking out. I remember some of the letters I wrote her from Zimbabwe when she was in England, like, Mom, my skin's breaking out, and all the advice that you'd want from your mum and the different things your body is doing at that time, and thinking, I don't necessarily feel comfortable speaking to my dad about this. And my dad's doing his best to be like, no, talk to me about these things. So it was, yeah, it was an interesting experience, missing my mum a lot and thinking, oh my gosh, when am I going to see her again? And then thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to go to England. So I then started high school in Harare, the capital, an all girls school called Arundel. And again, so that's me moving from Karoi to Harare. So I'm now without my mum and my dad. And I'm starting this kind of this life, but also knowing I'm going to go to England very shortly. So it was a roller coaster of emotions. I think that's the best way to put it. There was excitement, there was fear, there was I miss my mom, then there was I miss my dad, then just a lot of things going on. So when we came to the UK, it was myself, my younger brother, and my younger sister. We were accompanied by my mum's sister, my mum's older sister, so my auntie. So she was there, and she made it. She's a character. She's really lovely and really fun. So what was a daunting experience was made to be, a bit more fun. than what we expected. So it wasn't a lonely ride to the UK. I was very distracted by my auntie, trying to take the focus off the fact that, I was thinking, when am I going to see my dad? And I've just left all my friends and all my family, and because it's a big thing. You're leaving everything, and everyone you've ever known. And you're not too sure how this is all going to pan out. But like I say, having my aunt on the flight who did her utmost to just keep our mind off things and just, keep smiles on our faces was good. The first day was the fact it was cold. I got here and it was freezing. And my mum, another thing, I always say this to her, I thought my mum was like dying. Like literally, my mum used to be so much bigger. And then when I saw her, she was like so tiny. I'd never seen my mum so small. She was working super hard. So I remember that memory of thinking, oh my gosh, is my mum okay? Why does she look this skinny? She's never been this small. And then thinking, it's cold. And then looking at chocolate bars and thinking, oh, I want to try all the things I've seen on TV. So this was genuinely, as a person arriving at the airport, obviously seeing my mom, being really happy to see her, but being really concerned because she's dramatically shrunk. And then thinking, it's really cold. Wow, I'm not used to this. And then immediately, your mom says that you're hungry and you go look at the snacks and you're like, all these things I've been seeing on the TV. I'm going to try this chocolate bar and that chocolate bar. So quite interesting, really, for a first impression of the airport. But I think the first impression of the country, I'd always imagined, England to be tea with the Queen and cake and scones, darling. And then I landed in North Nottinghamshire in a small town called Hucknall, where the accent is it doesn't sound like that. It's just very different, isn't it, to what you see on TV, to what you perceive Britain, England to be like, So it was, just different. It was different, but it was good. It was nice to see my mom again. I was really happy about that. And that's what I would say were my very first impressions. I don't know if you want my impressions of school. That was different. The school I went to in Zimbabwe was very much, strict. Every time you saw an adult or a teacher or a parent, you had to take your hat off. Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. Very regimented in our behavior and how we carried ourselves, where I feel like England was just more free flowing. Children had a lot more opportunity to say what they felt, whereas, that was not the case. In Zimbabwe, you weren't just saying how you felt, or if you didn't like what the teacher said, you weren't, talking back. So I just felt like, I thought, wow, English kids are brave. If I tried this in Zimbabwe, I'd be in detention. I'd be getting a hiding. I mean, all sorts of things. It would be a completely different response to the freedoms that I thought, young people were afforded here. But it was different. It was very, very different. I got asked things like, did I ride an elephant to school? I got asked things like, did I learn English at the airport? I got asked very random questions, but also because it was a curiosity, right? I was from a child from Africa. And I believe at the time I was the first child from Africa. So it was, all the questions and, so what do you guys eat? And it's just like the same thing you guys eat, but also other cultural things. So, it was just kind of a real exploring of each other, and in a nice way, because kids are more curious, I think, and will ask you anything that comes to mind, whereas adults will be like, oh, you don't ask that question. So I always got really weird questions. Do you guys wear straw skirts? No. So it was interesting. History wise, I think what did stand out was the fact that the history wasn't as diverse as I expected it to be. It was very much certain topics, and certain topics were not really discussed. I don't think they delved into a lot of the things around like African history or Black history. I mean, don't get me wrong, we had some programs later on that, and that was in addition to the syllabus, but in the curriculum itself, there were some real gaps around. And, no wonder the types of questions that people were asking me when I arrived, if you're not learning about African culture and, the history of England and Africa. So it's not just because you're learning about Africa because it's this place you've never been to, but actually there's a real history between England and Africa that I don't believe is taught, and then people don't understand how we come together, or what, why I speak English. Well, why do I speak English? Because we were colonized by the English, but not many people would know that or learn that in school. So I think there was definitely some gaps where I thought, I was just shocked people didn't know. It wasn't like violent or, being called names. And I don't know, it was more so people being really curious about me being African. They had their own prejudices, but I guess I'd walked into a scenario where I was thinking, the only African person here, and I'm the only person they can ask these questions. So I'm going to answer them as best I can. So it wasn't one of, I didn't feel it immediately. Don't get me wrong. There were things that happened in schools. There were incidences that did come up where, children would be children and probably say things that they'd heard their parents say. But I think I was quite mature, even at a young age, to know what to rise to and what not to rise to know what to explain as well. I think that's one thing I think that's probably, I don't know if it's a gift or a curse really, but just the ability to look beyond people's comments sometimes and understand where they're coming from, and try and break those down, which is probably how I ended up in politics. Sometimes it's not what someone is saying to you, it's fueled by something else. Sometimes it's just trying to understand where someone's just horrible, or where someone just needs you to explain or take a little bit of time to be kind back to them to diffuse any negative feeling. So I think I learned that from a young age. And I've always wanted unity, so that's how I kind of move. If someone wanted to start something with me, I'm trying to diffuse it very quickly, trying to find common ground together, and just trying to move forward in a peaceful way. You're coming from a foreign country. You also don't want to be starting up fights with everybody and all sorts of things. So you're more a peacemaker. Well, that's the role I chose in my childhood. So I went to the University of Lincoln and I studied criminology and international relations. I remember when I picked it, initially it was just criminology, and my dad was like, "What is that?" So he's like, "Try again." I was like, "Okay, I'll go back to the drawing board." It's like criminology and so international relations. I've always, that would have been a natural second pick, but I was really interested when I'd studied sociology. We'd done a module of criminology and sociology at A level. And I was just really interested in that, in justice, understanding, not just the consequence of your actions, but why people do things in the first place. And then, my dad was like, "Yeah, try again." So I did criminology and international relations, which I'm glad I did. It feeds into a lot of the things that I do today. And yeah, that was probably the more challenging side of my degree, I think. I found it a lot harder, but worthwhile. The minute I got to university, I found ACS because, of course, you're going to look for the African Caribbean Society because you want to know where you're going to buy all your food in this new place, or where you're going to meet like-minded people potentially, or, actually how diverse is this university? So I started as a member in my first and second year. And then in my third year, actually, I was a co-president with a lady called Lisa. But that was more, again, I don't know who does that in their third year, where you're meant to be focusing on your dissertation. But I was passionate about making sure that there was a lot more education around understanding of different culture. So that was something that I got into it for, because often, it can be about the social aspect of it. And I really wanted to marry the social with an educational kind of side to that. So having more debates about meaningful topics, going on trips outside of the university space, recognizing that not everybody has been to a seaside. It's an assumption that everyone who's at university with you right now has been to a seaside. So let's go on a trip to a seaside. And some people hadn't been, and it's those things, just about opening up opportunity and not making assumptions that everyone's been afforded the same things you've been afforded, and looking at diversity from different angles, diversity and experience, sharing those experiences and bringing people together. So in my time, and Lisa's time, there was a lot more people in the African Caribbean Society that were non-Black as well, because they were also intrigued about the different things that we were doing, and it just brought in different perspectives. And And that was the aim and the goal. And we were glad we did it. I think when you're coming from a country like Zimbabwe, you are already, when you move because of politics, in the sense that, you know, any sort of instability in a country, in the political system, in the economy, if anything like that drives your move, you can't not be turned on to what's happening politically, because that is why your whole family's left, you know, they're looking for better opportunities. And so I've always, because of where I come from, I'm awake to it. It's not something I can ignore. It is now me. So when I got involved, it was more so throughout my years, just whenever there was a position or an opportunity to speak up about it, I just used my voice. So whether it was like school council or debate, or, you know, even at university, I went on to be, you know, president of the African Caribbean Society. I've always found myself in positions where if there is a platform to speak and I have something to say, then I will say it. I will use the freedom and the luxury and the opportunity to be heard, you know, and often not everyone is like that. And you can see it in any room, even in a classroom, you know, when the teacher says, does anyone have any ideas? It's never like all the kids putting their hands up. There's usually a few key people that tend to always put their hands up, or, you know, so you kind of start to move through life going, okay, right, am I going to speak or be quiet? You know, am I going to do something or just complain? And so how I got into politics, I think, was just a gradual from, you know, moving to the UK, being awake to African politics, British politics, and then just throughout my years, just stepping up and having a voice. And then when I got into politics, when I got elected in 2015 as a councillor at Ashfield District Council, that was also due to, it was a time where I was, you know, going to different network events and hearing people complain about life and the NHS, and I just thought, you know what, I want to do something about it. I don't want to just complain. I want to do something about it. And then I went on to stand for election and be the first Black person to be elected at Ashfield District Council ever. And I got to represent Hucknall, which is where we moved to when I came straight from Zimbabwe. So it was also amazing to be able to give back to the place that gave so much to me as well. So my school was there, my friends were there. So it was good to be able to do some good work in the community. My dad is in politics. Growing up, I mean, I suppose, well, I would say growing up, you know, my dad was my hero. Like, he was just really cool. He had this just, he's a pharmacist by profession, but my dad had, you know, he's alive. I don't know why I say had, like he's not here. My dad has swag, but back in his day, he had swag. And he was like a businessman, but then also in politics, and really cared about the community. So, you know, he was a local councillor. He was the president of the Lions Club and would raise money for, you know, the people who are less fortunate in the community. And he would always take us along, you know, when he's giving out things to help people. So I watched my dad, and I think I often probably don't realize how much that was a seed in my own life. But as we speak about it, it definitely was. You know, he went on to be a mayor, and, you know, he's currently an MP. So, you know, definitely he is a big influence. And to be fair, when I have moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's going a bit crazy, he is somebody who I will speak to and say, you know, Dad, what do you think? Or I've written this speech, Dad, what do you think? So I do value, you know, he's my dad, you know, so I value his opinion. But no, I definitely think that watching him, he's never said to me, you should get it. He's never in his life actually said, you should get into politics. So it's quite funny how my path has gone that way, because he never, I wonder if he even saw me in politics. I probably should ask him that question, because he never, to, like, you know, encouraged me to do it. But yeah, he's definitely an influence. And yeah, thinking about it now, I would say there were a lot of seeds planted throughout my youth as a child, as a young person, where I saw him do good things. And so probably how I ended up here. Zimbabwe got its independence in the 80s. So there was there's a lot of development that needed to happen, and a lot of catch up, and, you know, freedom as a start to be able to do those things. So
I think politics here, how is it different? I mean, I suppose there's the structures that, I mean, I'm not a politician in Zimbabwe, so it's really difficult to directly compare it to the work that I do. But I feel like with the work that I've done here, just to be able to kind of go, the campaigning style is different, for example. So we go door to door knocking, whereas like I know, for example, from what I've seen as well, and some of the stuff my dad took me around to, rallies in Zimbabwe are a lot bigger, and the politicians speaking to the masses and a lot more than you are going knocking door to door. Because I can imagine even the gaps between some of the houses and this. Oh goodness, I don't think they do it our way in England. But yeah, the campaign style is different. I suppose resources would be different as well. Speaking very plainly, the opportunity, different amounts of funding to do different things, different priorities. We have an NHS, National Health Service, we have minimum wage, we have so many other things in place from a policy perspective that kind of separate our priorities. So there are other priorities in Zimbabwe that are very different to ours. So I would say, yeah, it's probably different playing field completely. Change doesn't happen overnight. You just have to keep pushing. You look at the struggles that have gone before us, even like, as I mentioned, Zimbabwe's independence, you look at the civil rights movement, you look at, race relations, even in this country and how far we've come. So I think it's like every generation, it's like a relay race. Every generation, you get given the baton and you have to sprint and do as much as you can in your generation so that when you hand that baton to the next generation, they're better off. And that's kind of how I'm doing my politics, is that I want to be able to do my sprint. And when I hand that baton over, I can say they're better off than I was. That's how it should be. And unfortunately, at the moment, we're not better than our parents at the moment. So there's something very, very wrong with politics if the next generation isn't doing better than the last generation. So I'm hoping that in the work that I do moving forward, I'm able to fix that. And that needs to be fixed in this country at the moment. So, yeah. I work in inward investment. So I'm a business expansion specialist by day. And I essentially work with growing businesses on their expansion plans, whether that's looking at talent to grow their business, property that they're looking to grow into, different ways to find funding, for example, if they want to scale their business. So my job is to make sure that the companies that are wishing to grow are given all the tools they can to grow, so we can provide jobs and create jobs for the city. So I really enjoy that because, I do really enjoy it. It's hard work, and I work with all sorts of different businesses, but it's really rewarding because obviously when you see a business do well, it means everything for the economy. It means everything for that business owner. And to be able to create jobs is also a great thing because we know that a lot of people need work. And so I enjoy what I do. I also am a board member at Nova Education Trust. So I sit on that board, passionate about education, passionate about ensuring that every young person has access to equal opportunities. And so that's important to me in my free time, whatever that looks like. I don't think I have free time ever in my life. But business, education, politics, anywhere where I feel I could potentially help. If I was in Zimbabwe, I am not sure whether I would be in politics, but knowing what I know about like my family, my dad, it's probably likely that I might have even got to that decision a bit sooner potentially, or I might have decided, oh no, I completely want to do something different. I think one thing I know about myself is I would have wanted to help. Like that's any job I do. So even with the business and helping businesses grow, I help businesses grow. With politics, I'm helping people. With my education role, I'm helping young people. So I do know that that's something that's really important to anything I put my hands to be able to have that where hopefully I can make a difference. So whether it would have been politics or something else, I have no idea. But I'm going to think about that. I think before COVID, I would try and go at least once a year. But the last time I was in Zimbabwe was when I was 30, so that's 3 years ago. And that was good because actually I got to see my grandmother before she passed away. Obviously, I wouldn't have known that she was going to pass away, but it was nice to see her because obviously that was the last time I saw her. But yeah, I do try and go as often as possible. I've got lots of cousins, lots of aunties, lots of family. But sometimes the schedule just, life doesn't permit. But hopefully I will go next year. So that is the plan. When I would go back and I'd be like, yeah, we're going to go out. And my dad was like, out where? Like, what time do you call this? Like, because in England, living with my mom, going out with your friends, even at like 15, you're out till late. You can go to the cinema. Maybe the last film ends at midnight. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's a last bus you guys catch. It's safe. She's not concerned. It's not like that, where I grew up, you're not out at the time. My dad, even at 24, my dad was like, oh, you need to be home at 10:30. I was like, no, so I think, don't get me wrong, maybe it's just my dad as well, but there were those things where I was now accustomed to the freedoms and this, I guess, yeah, the security and structure. So like I say, my mom was happy for me to go out because there was a midnight bus that she felt was safe, that she knew where to pick me up, whereas that infrastructure with midnight buses and all these different things are very different. So I think that was an example I would give where I realized, yeah, my dad was like, this English thing that you're bringing here, this is, what time do you call this? African time. You'll be home at 10:30. And I'm just like, oh, so I think it's just those little nuances that I felt like, oh gosh, if I was in England, I could be out till late, or yeah, just different things. Off the top of my head, it's really hard to just jump out and think of them. But that's one thing that did stick out. Or even when you're going to like the village and you're obsessed about things that other people at the time were not obsessed about. So you're used to like having your internet. And then my other cousins are like, girl, there is no internet here. You just chill out. You think of something else to do. And it's just they're laughing at you like, oh, internet, there's no electricity, mate, to charge your phone. Never mind internet. So they're looking at you like, oh, you're such an outsider. And you're just thinking, I just want some internet. So yeah, just fun things, not so much anything bad. I can't do a 5-day trip to Zimbabwe, more like 3 weeks to a month, because, I'm going to Koroe, I'm going to Kwekwe, I'm going to Bulawayo, I'm going to Harare. So it's never just I'll just quickly nip there, because all you'll hear is she came and she didn't see me, and she came and she didn't see me. So I try and, because I don't go often, I try and pack in a big trip so I can do all the things that I want to do. So yeah, it's always a big road trip. I will definitely always be Zimbabwean. I was born there, I was raised there, and I'm a British citizen now because I now live here and I'm a British citizen. But everything that makes me me I couldn't denounce any of it because it's what made me me. So do I consider myself? I consider myself both. If I'm honest, I consider myself a Zimbabwean and I consider myself British. And yeah, I think it's a complex topic, isn't it? That because, some people will look at me and always consider me Zimbabwean, because some people's British is not, people sometimes equate Britishness to white. And so, that's something that some people do. So yeah, I would say, I mean, now I've been in this country for more than half of my life. So there's a real cultural impact, definitely. I think, it's weird, isn't it? Because sometimes when you go back to Zimbabwe, people are just like, you're so not Zimbabwean. And then because you've kind of had all this other external, not that they're not saying you're Zimbabwean, but the things that you do, the things that you are now, you class normal, that you just wouldn't be classed normal on the other side of, of where you're from. But then also when you're here, there's some people who just see you as Zimbabwean. So I think it's just important for you to be sure of your own description of yourself. You know, you are the one walking through life and navigating life. And if you see yourself as Zimbabwean, you see yourself as Zimbabwe. You see yourself as both. You see yourself as both, and you just can't let people define you. I think that's really important. And you know, some people might answer differently because they see themselves as one and not the other, and that's okay because it's your definition for you to have. So I would say that I got my British citizenship in 2010. So wow, 10 years. Oh, it's 2022, 12 years ago. So yeah, that wasn't, I think one thing that was probably or can be challenging is it's expensive. You know, the process is the process. We'd had our indefinite leave to remain, and it was more so around having the money to pay for the process and getting it sorted out. So when I graduated and I'd finished university, I was just like, that was when I got my job. That was one thing I was doing. I was saving for my citizenship and I was getting it done. And I also recognized some of the challenges with having a Zimbabwean passport in the UK at the time, job opportunities. You know, if you wanted a job where you could maybe travel internationally, having a British passport was an added advantage. There were some school trips even at university I didn't go to because kind of the visa process, you know, everyone got to go to the UN during my university trip. I did not go because it was going to take way too long to sort everything out in the time that everyone went. So I missed out on that. So even at university, I recognized the importance and the power of having a British passport and the opportunities that it could also afford me and my family, and the opportunities and doors it would open, not just about, you know, travel, but job opportunities. And yeah, so I got that sorted in 2010. And yeah, it was more so just like saving for it and getting it done. It wasn't complicated much, to be fair. On the day that I got my citizenship, yeah, I think it was just a relief because even though, you know, the process is going to be, you know, submit your application, you know, pay the money, do your life in the UK, test all the different things that you've had to do to get to that point, you're kind of still thinking it's not real till it's real. You know, is the rug going to be, you know, taken from underneath me? Are they going to say access denied? You know, I mean, it's all of those things when you move somewhere and you hear the different stories, you know, and not everyone's story is not everyone's story is straightforward. Not everyone's journey to citizenship is easy. I know people who've waited 20 years for it. I know people who have struggled. So yeah, it was more so feeling really excited, feeling really nervous, hoping they weren't going to change their mind. At this point, they weren't going to change their mind, but it's all those little feelings you get in your stomach. But yeah, just feeling like, oh, I've done this now, relief, and just thinking about the next thing, like, okay, perfect, I've been giving my citizenship. That means, you know, things will be easier. You know, I'd be lying to say that not having British citizenship doesn't make life easy. It makes life easy and it makes life easier. And when you're in a position where you can have that, it's a blessing because, you know, you are aware of lots of people who might not have that, or you might be aware of, you know, I remember even traveling to Italy on my Zimbabwean passport and, you know, the way they looked at it. And I mean, this person had turned it upside down. I was thinking, I don't know what you think you're going to find in it, you know? And it's all of those things that, you know, now that never happens. Do you know what? I think the biggest thing about leaving Zimbabwe was like leaving family. And, you know, I don't think people understand how lucky it is to have like your immediate family and your cousins around you. You know, to see everyone grow, to see everyone get old, you know, seeing your family once a year or once every 2 years pretty much is not what you want, you know. So I think that's one thing I feel like I missed out on. I feel like I missed out on quality time and memories. And I suppose there's nothing you can do about it. And I suppose to put it in context as well, you know, you recognize that some people have had it worse. So you're kind of grateful for the life that you do have, because when you hear other people's stories, you're just like, okay, my life wasn't as bad or as challenging. I should just be grateful. But I think that's one thing that I I feel like I missed out on. You know, even my dad, for example. So, you know, I've missed, I probably had one birthday, like, you know, my dad has had one birthday with us in the 22 years. So every other birthday, he's probably spent it on his own in Zimbabwe. But a couple of years ago, he came on his birthday, and that was the first time we were together as a family. So it's those things that you take for granted, like being there for those special moments, whether it's a birthday, an anniversary. You kind of get used to just navigating not being around the people that you love. And it's interesting, I recognize that that's impacted how I am in general. So my partner actually was saying to me, oh, you know, he's a quality time kind of person. And I'm like, I don't equate love to you being in my space, because I've had to learn to love people from a distance, you know, and that has had to be enough. You know, I can't, if you don't see your dad all the time, you can't equate love to quality time, because that would just literally be heartbreaking. So I think that's impacted how I operate with people, because I cannot see them and they might think, oh my gosh, but I want to spend time with you. But I'm thinking, I love you. I feel like that's, you should know this. I care. And that's something I've had to learn in my personal relationships to work on. And, you know, sometimes you don't realize the impact it has on you as a person. But I think being able to, navigate that in my adulthood has been a learning curve for me. And thinking, oh, right, so that's how I built up that resilience, or how I learned to cope without the people I love, was just to be like, okay with distance and okay with them not being in my space. But, you know, in normality, you know, people are in each other's spaces all the time. And when you love each other, you should want to spend time together. So that's something that I've learned in a more kind of adult phase of my life. So my goals for the future, I hope to one day be an MP in this country. That would be something that I would love to be able to do, just to represent my community at a national level, and hopefully be able to change some key policies. I'm really keen on closing the gender pay gap, really keen on closing the ethnicity pay gap. It just does not make any sense why, you know, me and my equal counterparts shouldn't be getting paid the same in this day and age. So there's a lot of things that I am really passionate about doing that I feel would benefit everyone. And they're not my ideas, they already exist. It's just making sure that we don't lose that momentum with those things. So yeah, the future hopefully involves a lot more positive changes, and yeah, hopefully a family one day, hopefully get married and have kids. So all the gooey stuff, but yeah, and hopefully also do some work back on the African continent in the future, in my older years. It would be nice to give back and just work on projects where it, you know, I can benefit Zimbabwe or benefit other African countries as well.